Since coming to America 2 decades ago, Len Judd has been quietly making a name for himself. He's worked in the movies and martial arts, but mostly he's honed his horsemanship, creating a style all his own. I caught up with this eclectic horseman at Windfall Ranch in Alpine, California. Let's talk about you. Let's go back to where you were born and raised.
Northern New South Wales, Australia.
Were you one of those kids that was riding from a very young age?
Yeah, my father wasn't interested in horses. He was of that generation, that post-war generation. They wanted to modernise everything. Sure. They wanted to get away from horses. They wanted to drive everywhere. And yet, you know, as a young man, he'd obviously spent a lot of time with horses. And my grandfather had a team of working horses. He was a professor of agronomy, but he could make horseshoes. You know, he could work a forge. They're very adept with their hands. And my dad, he was a mechanical engineer, so he wasn't really into horses, but...
Kind of skipped a generation.
Well, yeah, horses were the dirigio. I mean, that's how you did things. This was long before motorbikes, and it was a horse culture. Much to my father's horror, we were far more attracted to the sort of cattle culture that was around us, which involved horses, a lot of horses, than we were, like, he grew sheep. Like, it's like, okay. Of course, the wonderful thing about sheep was we had access to beautiful sheepdogs, you know, so that was the saving grace.
So when you were growing up in Australia, was there a kind of a prevailing attitude towards starting horses and riding them and training them?
No, not that I saw, in the, you know, because it was the world of a child. My father bought me a really beautiful little sorrel horse off one of the local young men that lived in the area. And he was that horse that everybody dreams that they wish they'd have. He would jump anything. I didn't have to open gates.
Just jump over the fence?
He was just extraordinary. I won a lot of stuff on him in Pony Club. I used to have a room full of blue ribbons from jumping. He could jump, he could trot, so I won all the trotting races, walk, trot and canter, I won all them, and he could bend and flag. So I did really good on him, and you know, and that was once or twice a year that we went to Pony Club. But the rest of the time it was just charging around the ranch. It was like a cross-country course, you know, we gallop around, jump logs. And it was all bareback, any speed through any country. You know, now I'm quite happy to have a saddle on the horse, and I really don't advocate bareback riding.
One of the unsung forefathers of natural horsemanship was Australian Kel Jeffrey. As a young man with no prior experience around horses, he developed a non-traditional approach that utilized advance and retreat, extensive body-to-body contact, and pressure and release with a neck rope. You had some experience with his number one protege.
Yeah, Mr. Morris Wright. Yeah. And to this day, if Morris was standing in front of me, I would still call him Mr. Wright.
Yeah. What in your mind is the lasting legacy, if you will, of Kel Jeffrey?
He was looking at something and he could perceive a different way of doing it, but he wasn't quite sure what that was. In the moment where you reach that point where you know that you don't know, if you just sit and wait and do what the old Vaqueros do, go into a dwell, it will appear. The story I heard as a young man was that he had watched the horsebreaker and they broke them, and he stepped so far outside the box that Kel really was out there on his own for many, many years.
Well, you know, he didn't know what he wanted to do as much as what he didn't want to do, because he was so put off by how rough these colt starters were being with these horses. He was open, he kind of experimented, he found things that worked, and I like what you were talking about him. He kind of turned inward and allowed it to kind of come to him.
There's a story that I read about him, just like here in the old days when the rodeos were being serviced, they would go into the mountains and they'd run these wild horses out, and they'd put them in this big set of yards to keep them there until they were ready to use them. And there was no water there. And there's water just down the bottom of the hill in a creek. So, you know, and every stockman or horseman that was there knew that if they let these wild animals out, they'd most probably spend the next 3 days trying to catch them and bring them all back. And Kel walked into the yard, walked through the horses, walked through the group, said to the young guy at the gate, open the gate. They all followed him down the hill, they all drank, they all turned around and he brought them back.
Wow. The Kel Jeffrey story is sort of sad to me in that I don't think he ever really received the recognition or the appreciation during his lifetime that maybe he should have, because what he was doing was so different. And he wasn't, as I understand it, a very effective teacher.
Communicator.
A communicator.
Yeah. It's no different to here. You know, you read Tom Dorrance or stuff like that, and you soon realise that they watched how this guy did this, they watched how that guy did that, and sort of developed and evolved as they went along.
And they kind of expected other people to, if you were serious, to go through that same process.
You know, it was up to you.
Yeah.
If an old guy saw you doing something with a horse, he might ride past you and not say anything, and that might mean that it just really sucked, or it might mean it was the best thing you'd ever seen. You didn't really know. You know, information wasn't shared.
Well, I think a lot of things were different. For one thing, that was sort of proprietary. I mean, if you'd spent all this time learning, getting to be pretty handy with horses, I mean, that was your stock in trade. Why would you give that away?
Absolutely, and that's exactly what happened.
Well, you obviously have an appreciation for the old timers.
I was brought up around them. I mean, I was the last generation to be brought up around capable, handy men.
Yeah. So you spent some time with Tom Dorrance.
Mm-hmm. He's the only guy in this country that ever asked me, how did we work cattle back home, and what the heck's all that bull catching about?
Where has that taken you as a horseman? I mean, how do you see yourself today and your role in the American horse industry?
Yeah, that's a good question. I was 40 when I came here, and I had to completely change the whole way I rode. I'd never used a rope. And I can still remember asking Buck Brannaman, what do I do about this rope and stuff? And Buck said to me, he said, develop a good head loop and a good heel loop and you'll be welcome anywhere you go. He said, forget all that other fancy. He said, those loops are for guys that have got time on their hands.
And of course, he holds Guinness World Records for fancy roping like that.
Yeah. But he was right. A serviceable head loop and a good heel loop, and you're welcome anywhere you go because you're useful, you know. And that was how I was brought up. If you weren't useful, get off the boat and go somewhere else. Be useful. Where do I fit in? I'm like Kel. I've seen the other side, right? I've seen the dark side. I've seen the brutality. I've seen the nastiness. I've seen the meanness. I've seen all sorts of things. I've participated in all sorts of things because it was a learning process and a growing process. I've done a lot of inappropriate things to horses where if I could go back now, I'd go, geez, well, I think we'll look at that a different way. I've apologised to a lot of horses in the years that I've been here. We take these animals that in the first 3 days of their life can perform some of the most incredible manoeuvres that you've ever seen a horse do. Within 3 weeks, that is set in them. They can leap, rear, buck, and it's that movement that draws us to them. It's nothing else. That's what draws us. It draws the heart part of us to it. We're just enamored by it. And anyone that's not moved by it, you ain't human as far as I'm concerned. And then it's like we dumb them down. You know, and I say that with all kindness, you know, to everyone out there. I mean, I've dumbed plenty of them down myself. But we never ever get to ride them like they can truly be,
right,
even at the highest levels. So, in essence, it can sort of become, if we're not careful, it can nearly become a parody of what they can do naturally. So that's why I don't call myself a horse trainer.
What do you call yourself?
Len Judd.
Fell right into that, didn't I?
Yes, you did. I was wondering if you're going to ask me that.
After a wide-ranging chat under a shade tree, Australian horseman Len Judd took our discussion to the round pen. His partner was Dylan, a Texas-bred quarter-horse gelding. Prior to Lynn, Dylan had a rough life. A botched operation for cryptorchidism left him in physical discomfort.
Cryptorchid testicle was lying up here. Pretty darn painful.
Rough handling and crude training left Dylan with a distaste for people.
I really want everyone to get this. This horse was created by professional horse trainers. Right? And that's not cool.
Lynn is taking it a day at a time with Dylan.
I seriously recommend to people that you don't look at the horse. There's a big difference between looking and seeing. How you get access to seeing is to look at something or watch something out of your peripheral vision. When I watch him out of my peripheral vision, there's nothing that he can do that I can't see.
What's in your mind when you're asking him to do that?
I'll put it in language. I want you to go over there to my right.
So you've got a picture in your brain, even though you're not looking at him, he somehow is picking up your intention.
Yes, horses seeing pictures. For them, being around human beings is like watching TV back in the 1960s. The picture's on, picture's off, picture's on, picture's off. The picture's not constant. Then there's the overlay picture, right? So if I want him to go around here and I ask him to step off, the overlay picture is something happens, ooh, rattlesnake. But I can still know where he is and I'm not disconnected from him just because I happen to see a rattlesnake.
Lynn made it clear that he disliked the idea of putting pressure on a horse to get him to move.
I consider this force and pressure. I'll swing this at you, tell me how you feel about that.
Yeah.
If you don't move, I'll then hit you with it, tell me about how you feel about that. If I hit you 2 or 3 times, I'm a big guy and you still want to fight me. So I can't see if it produces that kind of result in a human that it's appropriate with horses.
He feels that horses, like people, instinctively brace against pressure.
Step into the ring, my friend, and learn all about pressure.
Are you serious?
Yes, I am. So, okay, you know that I do martial arts, right?
I do.
Okay, so I want you just to stand there, relax, just like that. Now, I'm going to take this hand, this is called palm heel strike, and I'm going to strike you over the top of the heart, okay? And I want you to do whatever your body would do. Okay, very good. Now, here's your chance to hit a big guy. Okay, I want you to do the same thing to me.
Okay. Oh, I see. As soon as my life came up,
I'm gone.
you were reacting to it.
I'm gone. Right, now, here's the deal. And I've only known you a short time and I love you dearly. But I just told you what a dangerous man I was.
Yeah.
And I offered to, and you see what you did?
I cowered.
Instead of moving. Thank you.
Laying a horse down is a time-honored way of helping one that's troubled or building trust in any horse. Tom Dorrance taught Lynn how to do it, and as Lynn demonstrated the technique, he shared more of his thoughts about pressure and release.
This is him putting pressure onto himself. Right? One of the things that I believe in the horse world got really misinterpreted by horse people was this thing about pressure and release. And I bet there was days that Tom Dorrance wished he'd never talked about it because people didn't get it. What people thought was said was that it's okay to put pressure on a horse and then when he gives, there's the release. That's not what was meant at all. What was meant was that if you know what you're doing and you're clear about where you're going, then if you run into an obstacle with the horse, it's the horse putting himself under pressure, not you putting the horse under pressure. And that whole thing got totally misconstrued. People took the language and changed it to where now it became okay to put pressure on a horse, and then when the horse gave up, you released. I don't think that the word pressure and release should be used in the same context at all, because it's totally not applicable. On a left lead there.
Our final treat of the day was some instruction on leads, followed by some fancy riding in some very close quarters.
A horse, when he steps forward to take a lead, he steps forward and up to open that shoulder. Okay, he has to. Horses change leads through their front feet. The hind foot change is the province of stallions. It is not the province of normal day-to-day horses. The hind foot change can only be achieved in a state of good vertical flexion through to collection. You see a lot of horse trainers, they'll ask the horse to walk forward, they roll the hip in and then canter it off. Never seen a horse do that, unless it's a stallion coming to a challenge or a potential mate. Then it's all hip, and it's all so he can keep this free. I don't wear spurs and I don't use my legs on my horses. I asked an old bridle man one day, I said to him, what's the definition of a bridle horse? And he said, a horse that works completely out of the bridle and not out of here. That's a bridle horse. So when you see people having to kick a horse to go, that ain't a bridle horse. If you want a horse to go, all you have to do is lift your life up and they're gone. You don't have to kick them, push them. He can feel my hips moving through him. So now we're going to lift up the right front, left front, right front, left front, left front, left front, left front, right front.
All too soon, my day with Len Judd was over. He'd given me a lot to think about. If you'd like to reach him, you can do so through his wife's website, BethanyPapaniTraining.com.